Welcome back. My name is Clarence Hill, and I am here with John Markhart, Lee Rowland, and Corey Hall, and we're excited to talk about being the dream. On this Dream Together podcast, today we're going to address education. And I know for a lot of people, we are coming at this conversation from several different angles. And if you know what's going on in society today, you've probably been driven to one or two sides. But let's have a dialogue right now on the Dream Together podcast and see if we can offer some solutions and some ideas that will push us towards being the dream. Good afternoon, morning, or evening. I'm just doing that for everybody who's going to be watching. Y'all, let's talk about this education conversation. For my family, we've done different forms of education. We were home educators, we've done private school, and we've done public school. For some people, those aren't even options. All we know is that for most of us, we want to see our children, and even those who aren't our own children, we want to make the best way possible for them to thrive and to not have to live through a lot of the division that we're carrying. How can we get a win for our generation so the next gen can go after something else? How can we get a win in the area of education?
I'll just start by saying I think one win would be framing the conversation from the beginning in a way that invites people in instead of pushing them out. So right now in our context, we're all in Oklahoma, there have been a lot of very divisive fights about education. That could be having to do with public school versus other forms of school. That could do with funding models. That could do with certain curricular questions of how do we talk about difficult issues like race in America in the schools. So there's just lots of fights, and I think those are all serious issues that we need to talk about. But I would love to start by saying we could probably all agree that we want to have an educational ecosystem in which every kid gets the best opportunity to thrive. And if we say that's a goal, then we could say, okay, who are the kids that are not being given that best chance now? What are the parts of this educational ecosystem that are struggling? Because we know we've got the data, we've got the statistics. In our poorest communities, there's lots of schools where 90+% of the kids are reading below grade level, and we know that has very high correlations to long-term incarceration and all sorts of other issues. So we know there's parts of this ecosystem where people are struggling. And wherever we're coming from in terms of the political divides or those hot button issues, I'd just say if we can start by saying, hey, we all care about the kids. We all want an educational ecosystem where everybody can thrive. And we're especially concerned on those kids that are falling through the cracks, that are in struggling environments. I think that'll be a helpful place to get started.
I do, but I also, it's like when I'm hearing you talk, I'm hearing a group of people yelling, that is not my problem. Mm-hmm. Those aren't my children. I worked hard. My grandparents worked hard. Stop telling me that I owe somebody something because you don't know my story. Mm-hmm. And, I can hear some of the polarization, a lot of especially if you talk about race, ethnicity, it ends up being a lot of black and white. But I've had friends who will say, when I was younger, I was the kid that was picked on in class. We were poor, and I worked really hard to get to where I am, and just to be classed with a group of people to say, I don't care, you don't know my story. There are people who are like, back in the day it was Irish Catholics and Jews. It wasn't just black and white where there was situations of people being ostracized. So I just hear this echo of saying, talk about it all you want to. I think I need to just go to another podcast because it's not my problem. How do you all address the conversation of it's not my problem, so talk about something else?
Yeah, I mean, I could bow out of this conversation because I don't have children. But what would that do?
Right.
I would see the world burning around me and be like, man, that fire looks really hot. Mm-hmm. But I have a solution or I have a role to play. I could be part of the bucket brigade putting the fire out. I think if we separate ourselves from problems that don't directly affect us, then we will start to see everything as having nothing to do with us and our decisions. And I think that the value of having kids in a thriving education system adds so much to our society that we don't even understand as a part of our fabric, that it is our problem and it is something we all have to care about. If I don't understand that kids who don't receive a space to thrive in educational environments today are going to be affected and have these adverse outcomes like higher incarceration rates, higher rates of poverty, higher rates of engaging in criminal activity, all of these outcomes that are negative, those negative outcomes affect the society that I live in. And so when I see myself complaining about the way the world is, I had a solution. I could be a part of the solution that helped bridge that for what the world could look like later. And so we just can't bow out. I don't get to bow out because I don't have children. I don't get to bow out because it doesn't affect me. I don't get to bow out as a parent who has kids who are in spaces where they're thriving. I don't get to bow out because I participate in my school's PTA and we're doing what we need to do for our kids. I still have to think about the fact that even if my kids do well and other kids don't do well, that is going to affect the way that they all live and grow up.
I love that idea. It's almost like you're adding to what we could maybe introduce as, what if the American mentality, again, it's that individualism thing. What if the American mentality did include others, where your prosperity is mine?
Well, just real briefly, I am inundated with thoughts in terms of how to respond, and, having a conversation about education as an educator in 45 minutes or so. I could talk to this till it's midnight and probably not repeat myself. But what I would share is that my sister Corey here says, we don't get to bow out. I don't have children and I have to care. And I just kind of like to piggyback on that a little bit and actually kind of respond to your statement for anyone. And we don't want to offend our listeners. We want you to press in and lean in. We want you to be interested. But this is your problem. This is your problem. It's everybody's problem when our children are not given hope. And so a lot of us are now familiar with the science of hope and all of this, but I've been talking about it for as long as I can remember, that a dangerous person is a person that has no hope. Okay. And we need to understand that when we are increasing the odds for us to walk in and live in danger, when we have people that we're producing with no hope. And so if we would stop and think, and I've been telling audiences this for a long time, my sister here is a person of high empathy and care. She worked in the social workers in that world and has, family and friends in it. But if you don't feel like, and this is what I say, if you don't really feel like, let me bring my volume down. If someone doesn't feel like, hey, I'm not my brother's keeper, get out there and make it on your own. I like to tell people, and I don't want to frighten people. I don't want people to respond out of fear, but I have been known to say this: I don't care why you do right, just do right and whatnot. So if this prompts you to do what I think is the right thing, please don't be offended that I chose this as the right thing. But if you're not your brother's keeper, then understand this, that the life you save by helping your brother might be your own. Okay. So we need to understand that if I give another man an opportunity to work, to thrive, that same person may end up helping me. And the chances are that they will. If they're healthy, they're strong, they have nourished bones and sinews running through that when I'm falling, that person could help me as well. But again, the sadness of this, a frightening thing about this is that person that is out there in the streets that doesn't have resources, they may resort to any necessary thing to live. And I would rather minimize that for people. We want people that, we don't want people to go to prison. But if they go to prison, we want the people to come out and be able to go and work and contribute to society. We don't want people to have mental health issues and things like that. But if they do, we want to throw out a safety net to them. In closing on this, it's I forget who was credited with coining this phrase, but it is better to build men and women than try to repair them. And the educational system is one in which way that we can do that. We can build young people. I tell people a lot that I believe the school is the last frontier. The other lines have been they've been weakened, they've been damaged, they've broken through that line. But that education line, we can all do something to help our schools hold the line.
Mm-hmm. Clarence, the question you asked me a second ago, or you asked all of us, what do we say to the person who says, it's not my problem? Those kids that are falling through the cracks, they're a part of this educational ecosystem that is struggling. It's not my problem. I would say that if we were in church, the first thing I would say is, love your neighbor as yourself, which means one of the practical implications of that is I have kids and I really care about their flourishing. So I really want them to be in a good school where they're going to thrive. And if you don't have kids, you could probably imagine that, or couldn't you, Corey? I'm sure you can. And but that part of that simple statement of Jesus, love your neighbor as yourself, means I need to care as much about my neighbor's kids' education as I care about my own kids' education. That's just a simple aspect of what that means. And when somebody asked him, and who is my neighbor? He told a story called The Good Samaritan to make the point that spiritual maturity means learning to see as your neighbor people even from a different ethnic and political and religious background than you, and care about them and their flourishing and their family as much as your own. And he taught that is the most blessed way to live. You find joy. It's more blessed to give than to receive. When I'm not just thinking about how do I take care of my own in my own little household, but take care of everybody. So I want to appeal to people's highest motivations. But if that didn't work, then I would say, come to lunch with Lee Rowland. And we're going to sit with him for 4 years, 4 hours, and he's going to tell us lots of reasons.
We have a backdrop that we have to kind of wrestle with as we have this conversation. And so that's what I'm staying very aware of right now. That when you say, hey, you need to care about somebody else's family and someone else's children, I hear the echo that says, hey, I didn't make those choices. We invited you to make choices, maybe this family did make great choices and the other family made bad choices. I think there's a both and in this conversation, because if we make one point, and where you all have made it very, very clear, there's a fulfillment in caring for others. There's a fulfillment in building a bridge of hope and seeing others lifted up out of the mire and having hope, their eyes brightening, growing up to being able to do, like we said in our last podcast, care for your own and have enough to care for others. There's the quote that says, education is the great equalizer. And for so many, it's because they went to a school and the brokenness from their families and their backgrounds, they found someone else who could be that voice that could tell them, keep going, there's hope. But I also want to say, we didn't say this, but we did start this conversation today really defending the side that says care for someone else. Mm-hmm. What I think because of our culture, a lot of people heard was that we're demonizing anyone who tries to make a point to care for your family, to work hard. And if I hear the term bootstraps, it's absolutely wrong. I want to say this, the bootstraps language has been used in such a way that it triggers people who have come from a hard background. But we also want to say that the concept of what would be called the dignity of work is also true, because in the compassionate way of some to try to make a pathway for others, sometimes too much money has been given in the wrong way to do things. And I just want to throw in the idea that, just because we're saying, hey, what if we could get so many who have a decent foundation and who have the ability that when a school choice program comes out, they can take advantage of it. They have the mobility to be able to say, hey, that's a blessing. I've been looking for something like that. Okay, everybody can't. I also want to say that on both sides of the conversation, it doesn't have to lead us into a head-on collision to say that it's one idea or the other. I believe that caring for others is right, but I also believe that there's a dignity of saying, I'm caring for you because I want you to be able to be a blessing to others. I just don't think we've sat down long enough to say, hey, let's respect the pain that someone's been through. Because when I see these kids in class, I'm like, I know your dad's acting up, but is it that kid's fault? I mean, is it really that third grader's fault? I mean, Lee, you were one of the first ones that gave me even some tactics on how do you address this kid when you know the pain they're going through and you know the rebellion that they're expressing in the classroom. It's not you. It's not the curriculum. It's not the teacher. It's all this backdrop. And you were the first person to give me some practicals on doing that. And I'm just like, y'all, let's stop this polarizing train wreck thing of you got the care for the kids versus build your own family groups. No, let's do some both and. And that's what we want to talk about today. Give me some both and language here so that we don't, I just didn't want the family promoting crew, which I am part of. I'm all for family, and everybody at this table is.
I got a couple both in thoughts, and I'll just add one thing to what you were just saying. I do think that, to treat, when a doctor's making a prescription, first step is an accurate diagnosis of what's happening.
Great.
And I think that one of the myths that we may need to dispel is that kids that are in a struggling school or a struggling school system are there largely or mostly because they have parents who are making bad choices. Right. And the reality is, like, living in the community that I live in, I see loving, devoted, hardworking parents and grandparents constantly saying, I am sacrificing everything for my kids. I will sacrifice anything for my kids. I want them to thrive. We need better option. We need more support. We need help. And these are, totally devoted people. So there's a whole history to that situation that they're in, that it's not, it's just not, it isn't the parents' fault. And the parents are crying out, we need more options. And with that in mind, I think a both and solution. I'll just say that wrestling with the school choice conversation in particular, I'm a pastor of a church that has a lot of public school teachers in our church and private school teachers and headmasters in our church. And so sometimes that school choice conversation feels very personal. And what we want to say is we know that the public schools already are serving most of the most vulnerable kids. Mm-hmm. So as a church, we're going to say that we are going to do everything we can to make those schools as best as they can possibly be by showing up to volunteer, by continuing to cast a vision for being teachers in those schools as a noble vocation, by supporting the teachers within our church. We're always trying to help out with their classroom or encourage them or do those different kinds of things, by advocating for policies that we think are going to help the public schools. We might get into fights about which ones will actually help or not, but we're all going to, in principle, be advocating for those policies that we think are going to help. So we're going to do that too. And we're also going to put significant effort into recognizing, hey, there are some really excellent private schools and they're thriving. And the kids that are going to them, many of those children are thriving. That's great. We celebrate that. We don't villainize or demonize it. But then we ask the question, how can we get more kids access to this school who have never had? How can this school actually become welcoming so that school choice isn't just a choice for the upper middle class and above, but if we're going to talk about school choice, we actually make it accessible to the most vulnerable.
Yeah. John Mark, you gave us eyes. into just a really simple concept, but I think it was beautiful that you said you gave parents who are low income. Low income does not mean I don't care about my children. And I think that was a solid thing for us to grab. Corey.
Yeah, I think what John Mark is saying is so helpful. I'm on staff at a church, and so we often talk about the ways that we're supporting the education system as a whole. And because it is a system, there are multiple layers and parts. But when I think about the people that make it up, it's parents, it's educators and administrators, it's all the facility workers, teachers, and also kids. And the ones who don't have agency to make change on their own are the kids. They're in the most vulnerable space in the conversation around education. And so the responsibility to shift and make changes, the major responsibility lies with the adults. And in order for us to give kids an opportunity to display work ethic, to do hard work, we have to set them up for that. And, the maxim that we hear all of the time, if you teach a man to fish, he'll fish for a lifetime, that piece, I'm like, well, what if he doesn't have a pole? Like, we can't even get to that conversation of teaching them to fish if they don't have the resources to fish, if they don't have a boat or an access to a dock. And so as the educators,
why does the fishing license cost $50?
Exactly. All of these pieces of conversation that we ignore of like, well, we're just going to tell them that they need to go do this thing, bootstrap or whatever it is, whatever language we want to center around. But the piece that we miss often in this conversation is we can have parents who are advocating and standing in and want to help their kids. And we can have teachers who want to serve kids well and administrators who want to serve kids well. But if we're working with broken pieces, there's only so much work that we can do. And so it's how do we repair those pieces? And then also how do we build better systems? So what Lee was saying about, it's better to build something than to repair it. Well, we're already in a state where the thing that has been built needs repair. Mm-hmm. And so we've got to do that work. But we also can do the work of starting to build better systems. And so I think about doing both of those pieces of work as how we fix education. We cannot keep working through this cycle of this is all we have. And so this is all we can use. Is we've got to figure out how to fix public schools, not look at any other options. We also cannot ignore public schools and only move towards new and better options, new and better toys, new and better systems. We have to look at both. And I think that in our state in particular, we are in Oklahoma, we see the devastating effect of a loss of interest in people going into the field of education. We've had colleges close their programs for education certificates in the last 2 years because of lack of enrollment of people interested in entering this field. And we have to ask the question, why is it that people don't want to teach anymore? In the last year in Oklahoma, we had over 3,000 emergency certification certificates issued.
Wow.
Because we don't have enough teachers in the classroom. Yeah. But here's the interesting thing. We have over 30,000 people who are certified to be teachers who are not teaching in the classroom. They have left that field. Why? Why would you get a degree in something that you're not actively serving or participating in? There have to be factors, and we need to start to see what some of those factors are. Is it a lack of support? Is it a lack of resources? Is it a lack of public support and help? Is it policy? Is it systems? What are the reasons why people have entered into the education field and stepped out and chosen another career path? I've talked to teachers who decided to take a year off to drive Uber because they will make more money or because they will have less stress. So what are the reasons that people are stepping out of this system when we need them to be there and to engage and to educate? And I think some of it is us asking the question of how are we supporting them to do the work that they're called to do? And how do we help them to remember that it is good work to be called to?
I need to throw a commercial in here. This podcast is called Dream Together because we're looking out so we can say, what does the picture look like and how can we get there? And right now, I think we're still ranked 49th in education in the nation.
Oklahoma.
48th or 49th.
Oklahoma,
Yeah.
48, 49, and now that's low. And I only bring that up to say we should only be able to go up from here. And to me, one of the solutions is that, by 2040, 2045, somewhere in there, minorities will outnumber whites. And the only reason I mention that is that we live in a multicultural society, and we train and teach our children differently. And our stories are different. And, when I was growing up, most of the stories that we heard, we would see heroes, but there was a different impact when I would see someone who looked like me. Now follow my thinking here. The values, let's use American values, hard work, character, courage, all of those things. When I saw those values in somebody who looked like me, it helped drive me and say, hey, I'm a part of building tomorrow. But if I didn't have someone celebrating somebody who looked like me, a lot of the things I was seeing back in the 80s, back in the 90s when I was in school, subliminally, I did not realize that most of the thing I saw in the movie, we were dying first in the movies, and let's not go there. And we were serving people. We were the ones who were afraid. And I just don't think we realize how much those concepts impact. And I just want to invite a conversation of let's become the greatest educators. So that's my softball pass to Lee Rowland. He wrote a book called Fantastic Voyage. And I'll say it 100 times. The people that'll be on this podcast, they have done something that I believe is worth pouring water on that acorn and multiplying it. I learned from Lee that if you want to deal with young black males, here I am, a black male, and I didn't realize one of the great secrets. He said, get the coaches to train the teachers. I'm like, wait, what? I had never thought of getting a coach. So one of the concepts of city transformation, of making change, is simply go into communities where they have produced those results with that ethnic group, with that culture, and put them in a platform, put them in a place, and build your curriculum with those historians. Build your curriculum with the principals who've made a difference. And before you do these sweeping changes and you throw these principals out who have this high relational equity with the parents, before you do that, y'all find out who has answers and solutions. So Lee, I don't want to even give you anything specific, but you're already in the Educators Hall of Fame. You got some brilliant ideas and Fantastic Voyage. Help us out, because there's some teachers that'll hear this, principals, superintendents, and who knows, maybe even people in government who can possibly bring together a Lee Rowland, the Lee Rowland of the Asian community, the Lee Rowland of the Native American community, First Americans, the Lee Rowland of the Hispanic and Latino community, and sit them down at the table and say, let's make the most dynamic educational system we can. And I'm concerned that we keep trying to do it with either the left or the right or one group. Help us, Lee.
Wow, this is such a huge can of worms to go in and open this can to look at the solution and solving it. I believe really the answer absolutely unequivocally starts at the top. So superintendents working really just really tethering to principals and what a principal is doing at the school, that leadership. So if I look at your church, as I look at John Mark's church, Corey is not the pastor, but as I look at her as a leader, so I believe one thing that we have to invest in very, very heavily is leadership, and not just the technical skills of that leader, but what is the heart of that leader. So the students that I work with at SNU that I teach that are about to be released to go out and be administrators, I tell them, I'm on night number 1, I'm chasing your heart and not your head. Okay. And it's these technical skills that many of our leaders have that they leave. I understand school law, I understand school finance, I understand some of the required stuff, but do you really understand what's required of you as a leader as you try to successfully lead a school? And I don't believe that enough people have that skill set. I'm not trying to boast on us in this room, but I'm simply saying that a leader has to be, you're not a leader until people are willingly following you. Okay. Otherwise, you just have a title and whatnot. And so I believe it absolutely starts there. That person cares, and that person is able to provide a vision for people. I was just talking with someone, and again, I'm not trying to just honor my dad, but St. Luke Baptist Church built 3 new church buildings under his leadership in a blue collar African American community. I mean, blue collar. Might use another color for that collar. I mean, these are hard working people that you're going to have to, he had to really, really paint a vision for them. In the 80s, our church, the last building that we built, housed the school and listeners, an accredited credit union, because blacks in our community couldn't get loans from the banks and stuff like that. So it's like, so what if we had a credit union? And so that's vision. And I think a leader has to have that. They have to have a thirst and say, this is not okay. This is not okay. I tell my future leaders, they didn't hire us to wish. They hired us to make it happen. The Board of Education appointed me as a leader of all the schools that I serve because they believe that I can make it happen. So my job is not to wish. My job is to roll up my sleeve. And one last thing, and again, we could go way into the weeds with this, but this whole concept that kind of comes and goes, some things kind of come and go, I think this should always be something that we should never forget. And this is the concept of servant leadership. And when we understand and look at how those two words go together, servant leadership. And when you serve people, so serving the teachers, the children, the parents, and they see you in that role, you're here to serve me. It takes on a whole different mindset for those that see, that are trying to follow you. I don't think, and I'm not trying to put anybody down and say I got it all right, but when people see you as the boss and you got the gauntlet and you whatever, that's not what you want if you really want to see change coming to fruition for a community and for your school.
That's good.
We sit here honored, one, to have learned so much from examples that went before us. You know, I'm thinking about your statement saying, you know, he started a school and a credit union and
Spencer, Oklahoma.
In Spencer, Oklahoma. That's visionary leadership. And I will say, you, in the last podcast, you said your father said that as they were grooming you up, they said, don't break his spirit. I just don't think we have a lot of great training on how to be leaders. I think the standard even for leadership today to even gain a platform is to grab one of the hottest hashtags and be willing to be the martyr for a hashtag. And you drive that. But I think the dream needs the visionary leader who can carry a dream. And let me add some of the middle part in here. When I first met Lee, his normal work day was 6:30 to 6:30. Lee had to have support to do that because he had children and a wife. So it wasn't just Lee's decision, it was his wife's decision too, that every day of the week, for the most part, We will not see him until the evening time, and who knows how much energy he had left. And on top of that, as being a crusader for a cause, you had to, I met you on a Saturday. So you were out running around on Saturday mornings, talking to these different breakfast groups and inviting them to love the children. You started off with a really simple thing, and you said, where's your heart? And, let's battle all we want to, but man, I think if we could keep the central focus, do you still love children? Lee and I went to Boston to Babson College to speak to an international group that was working on public health. And so they had heard about Lee, and the aim was to find these bright spots, these champions who are making a difference in their communities. And Lee went in with one simple message, and half the room just stood up at the end because he reminded everyone of their why. Where's heart? To love the children. And I think that would maybe hopefully invite some leaders to say, hey, if you come at this issue, just top down, maybe we're going to lose some great people along the way, but what if you invite some of the leaders to the table and have some conversation? I want to, before we wrap up this conversation, John Mark and Corey, you guys work in this area. And John Mark, you as a pastor, you live a different life because of your why. Mm-hmm. You decided that you're going to live in the community that you serve, and your aim and all the people that come around you, they already know we're doing everything we can to impact and bring opportunity to kids that would not have that opportunity. Tell us a little bit about St. Paul's, if you would. Tell us a little bit about how someone with a doctorate degree decided to turn around and go to a community that wasn't even your own.
Yeah, and can I back up and say one thing real quick before I answer that question?
Yours, yeah. All yours.
I'm just, since we are getting towards the end of this episode here in a few minutes, the listener knows how many minutes are left better than we do, because we might talk for a while. But I'm just thinking about who might be listening. And for any teachers and administrators who are listening, I just want them to hear us say, thank you.
Yes.
And you have one of the most important, sacred
Amen.
Jobs within our state.
Amen.
And we wish we could double your salary, but we will clap for you on the podcast. And I will vote for your next raise. I advocated for your last couple of raises, and I will vote for your next raise. But it's a sacred work that you're doing, and we want you to hear that support that you may not always hear. Second thing I would say is, I'm just thinking about people who are not in the education field. It may be that college student or that young entrepreneur or that business person or that stay-at-home parent who's listening to this and thinking, that was interesting, but what can I do? And I think there's actually 14 things that we could just start lifting off right now. And one of them is what we mentioned earlier, volunteering in the school system. In Oklahoma City Public Schools, we have the Reading Buddies program. There's something similar to that in lots of different places. But you can go spend an hour once a week reading with 3 or 4 kids. And I'm not doing that right now, but when I've done it in the past, it brightened my day, but it made a difference for those kids. You didn't have to be a trained tutor. You were just helping them develop a positive attitude towards reading. And in talking to those kids over the course of a year, I saw significant improvement in a lot of those kids. So that's something significant a lot of people can do. If you know a teacher, just know that Corey was talking about teachers leaving the field. I've seen a lot of teachers leave the field, and I've seen some teachers stay and persevere. If you know a teacher, know that they need encouragement. They need your support. They need you to say, hey, is there anything I can do to be present in your classroom, to help you with setup, to those kinds of things, and just to encourage them. And just on the policy issues, I would just say, this is John Mark speaking as John Mark. I do not speak for the Dream Together podcast, but in Oklahoma, I just feel like we need to keep giving our teachers a raise over and over and over and over again as much as we can. Yes. And I've had so many teachers that I'm personally investing in that see it as a sacred calling, but that they're leaving either because they can't take care of their family, or they're saying, I feel dishonored by the pay difference between us and surrounding states. So this is one of those policy things that you can choose to agree with me or not agree with me, dear listener, but that would be my encouragement. We need to support and value those people. But back to your question. Okay, last episode, I shared the story about how when I was growing up in a situation in a community that had struggling schools, some people sacrificed to help me get access to a school that my family could not have afforded, that then made a huge difference in my life. And I was not thinking about that experience, but I know it shaped my values when some 20 years later, a grandmother in our community of a kid that I'd been mentoring in our after-school program grabbed me by the arm and said, John Mark, what are you going to do to fix the problem with our schools? They're not teaching our kids how to read. We need you to help. We need you to make a difference. And she said, they didn't teach me how to read. And I pray God will help me to read so that I can read my Bible. But now my grandkids are struggling. What are you going to do about it? And it just felt like a jerk. Felt like it was God speaking to me and kind of grabbing hold of my heart and jerking me and saying, you need to get more involved. And for that kid, we were able within the church to find a college kid who could work with him and a couple of his friends on their reading scores. And just with, one day a week, a couple of hours of tutoring, he was able to catch up and get where he needed to be. But there's tens of thousands of children, probably at least 50,000 in that sort of at-risk environment in Oklahoma City. And so we were thinking, how can we do this at a different level, both through prioritizing more serving within the public school system, but also thinking through how can we provide, since a lot of us in a Christian world value Christian education, how can we provide access to that for kids that don't normally have access to it? So St. Paul's Community School was really just a prayer and a dream of several people saying, okay, if we were going to dream about the sort of Christian school that we would love everybody to have access to, what would it be like? And then how do we provide access to it? And anybody who's listening can go Google St. Paul's Community School in Oklahoma City and see it for yourself online and schedule a tour. But it's a philanthropically funded school so that people are paying tuition on a sliding scale based on their income. But most people are below the poverty line or very close to the poverty line, and they're sacrificially paying a very small amount of money every month to get access to this school. And the kids in the school are thriving. The school's 4 years old, and the kids are thriving academically. They're thriving spiritually and way outperforming what some of the other surrounding schools have been able to do, just because some really generous partners have given their time, given their money, resources to make that school go. That school's serving a growing number of students, but it's still a tiny percentage of the vulnerable kids who need help. So in my mind, we need more people continuing, and there's others that we could name, to think what are creative ways we can try new solutions while continuing to invest in that public school system that's going to be serving the majority of those at-risk kids.
Corey, it always seems like
Yes.
you're the one to bring us home.
Bring us home, Corey.
Bring us home, Corey.
Well, I'll try. I think
Bases loaded.
I think listening to you all talk, the thing that comes to mind is you mentioned the why. I had a conversation with a teacher this week who, over the last year, has wrestled with, should I leave this field of education or not? And through many conversations has chosen to stay. And when I asked her what the reason was she chose to stay, she showed me a picture of her kids in her classroom and said, this is my why. And yesterday, when she texted me frustrated about a delay in school being able to start due to classroom issues and location issues, she said, I'm remembering my why. It's these specific faces, these specific kids. The other piece of it was she was at a school that was really struggling, but the thing that kept her motivated and caring was visionary leadership. And so the administrator she served under encouraged those teachers so well that when he transferred to another school, this teacher who thought she may leave the field transferred to that other school with this visionary leadership to continue to do the work of investing in her why. Those pieces matter so much to me. As a person without kids, I think I could very easily say my responsibility in this conversation is minimal, but what I've chosen to do is step into spending time at local schools. I live in a neighborhood that has a school that is struggling, and I purposely moved there to be a part of serving that school. Even when our county redistricted and now my house is not a part of the school, but the people across the street are, I still serve in that school. So this week I'll be at a back to school bash, greeting parents, helping them find classrooms, helping kids get backpacks and figure out where to be. That will take 2 hours of my time. 2 hours that I could go sit in a movie theater and watch a movie, or be at home watching Netflix, or investing in the lives of kids. And what I'm doing is such a small part of what needs to be done. And I'm really thankful that I'm not the only person that's doing it. I'm going to show up and there are going to be 40 other volunteers at this school high-fiving kids on their first day of school. I'll be there on the first day high-fiving kids as they come into the building. I think that providing safety is such a huge thing for us. And I think that a larger conversation we can have later is how do we invest in kids being safe in classrooms and also outside of the classroom on the internet. And I think that for me, that's a space where I want to do some work in education, is talking to people about ways to create spaces of safety for kids to know that adults in their life can be safe people, and mentorship is a huge way to do that. Providing spaces where kids know that their teacher cares, their parents care, the educators care, and the broader community cares about them is the way that we're going to move this forward.
Y'all, thank you so much for just all of the input. It's been so rich. I'm thinking about the different groups that might be listening. And I know a lot of our conversation was directed towards children who are in need and potentially below the poverty line. That's where a lot of our conversation was directed. But we want to say that rewind everything and notice that we're talking to all educators. We're saying what you're doing matters, because there are children who have swimming pools in their backyards and they're going to school, and depression and suicide is on the rampage. And we care about all of these situations. And it is a day where an educator has to be almost as dynamic as being a lead pastor, which is not an easy role. Right. You never know what situation you're going to deal with day in and day out. And man, we want to continue to drive conversation that are going to drive us towards one another and not into opposite camps, because a lot of us who love the Bible know that there's a simple concept that says a house divided cannot stand. And we want the best option. We have heard of recent stories of, children being on the internet, being bullied, and even wrestling with suicide and depression. Those things are real. We encourage you to reach out if that's your story with your own children. But just know that our education challenge in our generation is going to take as many of us as possible to take off the glove, reintroduce tables, celebrate visionary leaders, celebrate those who are sacrificial, and let's dream together. Thank you all for joining us. We'll see you next time on the Dream Together podcast.